The hot summer sun beat down on the crowds outside Buckingham Palace. Hundreds of people stood there, taking photos and trying to get a good look at the famous royal guards. These guards wore bright red coats and tall black furry hats. They stood very still, like statues, not moving even when flies landed on their faces. Among the tourists that day was a man named Robert Blackwell. He was not like the other visitors. Robert wore a suit that cost more than what most people earn in a month. His watch was gold and shiny. Dark sunglasses hid his eyes, and he walked with his chest puffed out. People moved aside when they saw him coming. Robert was rich, very rich. He owned hotels all over the world and was used to getting what he wanted when he wanted it. He never heard the word no. His workers always said, "Yes, sir," and did whatever he asked right away. This made Robert think he was better than everyone else. "Get out of my way," Robert said, pushing past an old lady who was trying to take a photo. The woman almost fell over. Her husband gave Robert an angry look, but Robert didn't care. He wanted to get to the front of the crowd. When he reached the front, Robert saw one of the royal guards standing perfectly still. The guard was young, maybe 25 years old. His name tag read Private Thomas Wilson. Sweat ran down his face in the hot sun, but he didn't move to wipe it away. He just stared straight ahead, doing his job. Robert didn't like being ignored. He was used to people looking at him, talking to him, asking him for things. But this guard acted like Robert wasn't even there. "Hey you, look at me when I'm standing here," Robert said loudly. People around him turned to stare. Some shook their heads. A mother pulled her children away from Robert. Private Wilson didn't move. He kept looking straight ahead, following the rules of his job. The royal guards were famous for never reacting to tourists. It was part of their training. Robert's face turned red. He took out his phone and held it up close to the guard's face. "I want a selfie with you, soldier boy," he said with a mean laugh. "Come on, smile for the camera." Private Wilson didn't smile. He didn't move. He didn't even blink. This made Robert very angry. He was drunk from the 3 glasses of expensive whiskey he had with lunch. The alcohol made his anger worse. "Do you know who I am?" Robert shouted. His words were a bit slurred. "I could buy this whole palace if I wanted to." People were now recording Robert with their phones. Some were laughing. Others looked worried. A palace worker in a black suit came over. "Sir, please step back behind a line and lower your voice," he said politely. "Don't tell me what to do," Robert snapped. "I paid good money to visit this country. Your whole economy runs on tourism like me." The worker tried again. "Sir, the royal guards are performing their official duties. It's against the law to interfere with them." Robert laughed in the worker's face. "Laws are for poor people," he said. Then, before anyone could stop him, Robert did something terrible. He leaned forward, gathered spit in his mouth, and spat right into Private Wilson's face. The crowd went silent. Even the birds seemed to stop chirping. The spit ran down the guard's cheek, but still, he didn't move. For 3 long seconds, nothing happened. Then Private Wilson's eyes, which had been staring straight ahead, slowly turned to look directly at Robert. The guard's face showed no emotion, but his eyes were cold and hard. When he spoke, his voice was calm but very clear. "You have just assaulted a member of Her Majesty's Royal Guard," he said. "That is a serious crime." Robert's smug smile began to fade as he realized he had made a terrible mistake. The crowd was frozen in shock. No one could believe what they had just seen. Robert had spat on a royal guard. Even children knew this was a very bad thing to do. Private Wilson's face stayed calm, but his right hand moved to his radio. He pressed a button and spoke in a low, clear voice. "Security breach at Post 4. Requesting immediate assistance." Within 30 seconds, 4 police officers appeared. They wore dark blue uniforms and serious faces. The crowd moved back to make way for them. "That's the man," Private Wilson said, pointing at Robert. He spat in my face. Robert laughed, but his laugh sounded nervous now. "It was just a joke," he said. "Can't you people take a joke? I'll give you some money and we can forget about this." One of the police officers, a tall woman with short gray hair, stepped forward. "Sir, you are under arrest for assaulting a member of the Royal Guard." "Arrest?" Robert's face went white. "You can't arrest me. Do you know how much money I have? Do you know who my friends are?" The police officer didn't seem impressed. "Put your hands behind your back, sir." When Robert didn't move, two male officers grabbed his arms and turned him around. The click-click sound of handcuffs filled the air as they locked around Robert's wrists. "This is ridiculous," Robert shouted. "I'll sue all of you. I'll own this whole country when I'm done." The tourists were taking videos with their phones now. Some were smiling. A few clapped as the police led Robert away. One of the officers stayed behind to talk to Private Wilson. "Do you need medical attention?" the officer asked. "No, sir," Private Wilson replied. "But I would like to clean my face." "Of course." The officer handed him a clean handkerchief. For the first time since the incident began, Private Wilson broke his stance. He took the cloth and wiped the spit from his cheek. Then he returned to his position, standing straight and tall. Meanwhile, Robert was put into a police car. The handcuffs bit into his wrists. He had never been arrested before. He had always been able to talk or pay his way out of trouble. "Where are you taking me?" he demanded. "To the station," the female officer said. "You'll be charged and then have a chance to call your lawyer." Robert sat in silence for the rest of the ride. The city of London passed by outside the window. He saw people walking freely on the streets, something he might not be doing for a while. At the police station, they took Robert's fingerprints and photo. They took away his gold watch, his wallet full of credit cards, and his phone. They gave him a piece of paper to sign. "What's this?" Robert asked. "It lists your rights and the charges against you," explained a desk officer. "Assault of a royal guard is a serious offense. It carries a possible prison sentence." The word prison hit Robert like a punch to the stomach. He had never spent a night in jail, let alone prison. "I want to call my lawyer," Robert said. His voice was shaky now. All the confidence was gone. They led him to a small room with a phone. Robert's hands trembled as he dialed his lawyer's number. It was the middle of the night in New York, where his lawyer lived. "Stephen, it's Robert," he said when his lawyer answered. "I'm in trouble. Big trouble." "What happened?" Stephen asked, his voice heavy with sleep. I spat on one of those guards at Buckingham Palace. The ones with the fuzzy hats." There was a long silence on the phone. "Stephen, are you there?" "I'm here," the lawyer said. "Robert, what were you thinking? Those aren't costume characters at Disney World. They're active duty soldiers protecting the royal family." "I know that now," Robert said. "Can you help me or not?" Stephen sighed. "I'll book the next flight to London. But Robert, you need to understand something." "What?" "This time, your money might not be enough to fix the problem." As Robert hung up the phone, those words echoed in his head. For the first time in many years, he felt something he had almost forgotten. Fear. Robert spent the night in a small cell at the police station. The bed was hard, the blanket was thin, and the toilet was in the open with no privacy. He did not sleep well. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the face of Private Wilson, calm and dignified even with spit running down his cheek. Morning came with a harsh light through the small window and the sound of a key turning in the lock. The same female police officer from yesterday opened the door. "Mr. Blackwell, your lawyer is here," she said. Robert stood up quickly, relieved. Stephen would fix everything. Stephen always fixed everything. They took him to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. Stephen was waiting there. He looked tired from his overnight flight, his suit wrinkled. He did not smile when Robert walked in. "You look terrible," Robert said. "Good morning to you too," Stephen replied. Let's talk about your situation. It's not good, Robert. Just pay whatever fine they want, and let's get out of here, Robert said, waving his hand like he was shooing away a fly. Stephen shook his head. It's not that simple. The video of you spitting on the guard is all over the internet. Millions of people have seen it. Robert's face fell. What? It's on every social media site. News channels are playing it. They're calling you the ugly American. Your hotels are getting bad reviews online just because they have your name on them. Robert sat down heavily. This is a nightmare. It gets worse, Stephen said. The Crown is pressing serious charges. They want to make an example of you. If you're found guilty, you could go to prison for up to a year. Prison? Robert's voice was barely a whisper now. Stephen nodded. And there's something else. Something unexpected. What now? Robert asked, afraid to hear more bad news. Private Wilson, the guard you spat on, has asked to meet with you. Robert looked up, surprised. Why would he want to meet me? I don't know, Stephen said. But it might be good for your case if you agree to it. Show that you are sorry and willing to listen. Robert didn't feel sorry. He felt angry and scared. But he nodded anyway. Fine. Set it up. 2 hours later, Private Wilson walked into the room. He wasn't wearing his red coat or tall furry hat now. He had on a simple green uniform. Without the fancy guard clothes, he looked younger, just a man in his 20s doing his job. Robert tried to look confident, but his hands shook under the table. Private Wilson sat down across from him. For a long moment, he just looked at Robert, his face serious but not angry. Do you know why I wanted to meet you, Mr. Blackwell? He finally asked. To yell at me, to make me say sorry. Robert tried to sound tough, but his voice was weak. Private Wilson shook his head. No, I wanted to show you something. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small photo. He placed it on the table and pushed it toward Robert. It was a picture of a little boy, maybe 6 years old, standing next to a man in a Royal Guard uniform. The boy was smiling wide, missing his 2 front teeth. That's my son, James, Private Wilson said. And that's me on my first day as a Royal Guard. It was the proudest day of my life. Robert stared at the photo, confused. Why are you showing me this? Because yesterday my son saw the video of you spitting in my face. He asked me why a grown man would do such a mean thing. What would you like me to tell him? Robert opened his mouth, but no words came out. For the first time, he saw Private Wilson as a real person, not just a guard in a funny hat, not just someone to push around, but a father, a man with a life and a family who loved him. And Robert felt something new, something real. Shame. Robert stared at the photo for a long time. The happy face of Private Wilson's son made his chest hurt. He had never thought about the guard having a family, having a child who looked up to him. Robert started to speak, then stopped. All his life, he had used words to get what he wanted, to make deals, to push people around. But now, no clever words came to mind. Private Wilson waited, his eyes steady on Robert's face. I don't know what to say, Robert finally admitted. That's a start, Private Wilson said, being honest. Robert looked up, surprised. He had expected anger, but the guard's voice was calm. Why aren't you yelling at me? Robert asked. Would that help anything? Private Wilson asked. Would it make you understand better? Robert thought about it. Probably not. I'd just get angry back. Private Wilson nodded. Exactly. And nothing would change. A heavy silence filled the room. Robert felt strange. Usually in meetings, he was the one in charge. He was the one who made others feel small. But now, sitting across from this young guard, Robert felt small himself. My grandfather was a Royal Guard too, Private Wilson said after a while. And his father before him. When I stand at my post, I'm not just doing a job. I'm carrying on a family tradition. When you spat on me, You spat on all of them too. Robert winced. Each word hit him like a small stone. The uniform means something, Private Wilson continued. It stands for duty, for honor, for sacrifice. He paused. Do those words mean anything to you, Mr. Blackwell? Robert wanted to lie. To say yes, of course they did. But looking at Private Wilson's honest face, he couldn't do it. No, he said. They don't. Or they didn't until now. Again, Private Wilson surprised him by nodding. Thank you for being honest. There was another silence. This time, it felt less heavy. Something was shifting in the room. In Robert's mind. What happens now? Robert asked. That's partly up to you, Private Wilson said. I've spoken to my superiors and the prosecutor. I've told them I don't want to see you go to prison. Robert's eyes widened. You don't? No, I don't think that would help anyone. But I do think you need to make this right. How? Robert asked. For once in his life, he was ready to listen rather than talk. A public apology, for starters, Private Wilson said. Not just to me, but to the Royal Guard as a whole. And community service, real work with your hands, not just writing a check. Robert nodded slowly. These were reasonable requests, much more reasonable than he deserved. And one more thing, Private Wilson said. He tapped the photo of his son. I want you to come speak at my son's school. Tell the children what you did and what you learned from it. This request made Robert's stomach tighten with fear, standing in front of children. Admitting he was wrong. It would be harder than writing $1 million check. The choice is yours, Private Wilson said, standing up. You can fight the charges. Use your money and your lawyers. You might win, you might lose, or you can take this chance to do something different. To be something different. He held out his hand. Robert stared at it for a moment, then slowly reached out and shook it. I'll think about it, Robert said. Private Wilson nodded. That's all I ask. He walked to the door, then turned back. My son asked me another question after he saw the video. What was that? Robert asked. He asked if the mean man would ever say sorry. With that, Private Wilson left, closing the door quietly behind him. Robert sat alone in the small room, the photo still on the table in front of him. For the first time in many years, he thought about who he really was, and he didn't like what he saw. That night, Robert lay on the hard bed in his cell, unable to sleep. The face of Private Wilson's son kept appearing in his mind. The boy's smile, his missing teeth, his pride in his father. Robert thought about his own son, back in America. They hadn't spoken in 2 years, not since Robert missed his college graduation because of a business meeting. His son had called him selfish. Maybe he was right. Morning came, and with it, a decision. When Stephen arrived, Robert was ready. I want to take Private Wilson's offer, he said. I'll do whatever he asked. Stephen looked surprised. Are you sure? We could still fight this in court. I'm sure, Robert said. For once in my life, I want to do the right thing. The next day, Robert stood in front of cameras and reporters. His expensive suit was gone. He wore a simple shirt and pants borrowed from the police station. His face was tired, his eyes red from lack of sleep. My name is Robert Blackwell, he began. His voice shook a little. 2 days ago, I spat in the face of Private Thomas Wilson, a royal guard at Buckingham Palace. The cameras clicked. Robert took a deep breath and continued. What I did was wrong. It was disrespectful not just to Private Wilson, but to all the men and women who serve with honor. I am deeply sorry. As he spoke, Robert felt something strange happening inside him. The words that had started as just words began to feel real. True, he really was sorry. Private Wilson has shown me more kindness than I deserve, Robert said. He could have demanded I go to prison. Instead, he asked for something harder. He asked me to become a better person. In the back of the room, Private Wilson stood in his regular uniform. He watched Robert with a calm face, giving a small nod. I will be staying in London for the next month, Robert continued. During that time, I will do community service. I will speak to school children about respect, and I will try to make up for what I did. The reporters shouted questions when he finished, but Robert didn't answer them. He stepped down from the small stage, feeling lighter than he had in years. That afternoon, he started his community service. They gave him a broom and told him to sweep the streets around Buckingham Palace, the same streets where he had walked 2 days ago, thinking he owned the world. People recognized him. Some took photos. Some laughed. Robert kept sweeping. An old woman stopped beside him. "You're that American, aren't you? The one who spat on our guard?" Robert nodded, his face hot with shame. To his surprise, the woman smiled kindly. "Good for you, love. Takes a big man to admit when he's wrong." As the sun began to set, Robert's hands were sore from holding the broom. His back hurt, but somehow he felt good. Better than he had felt after making million-dollar deals. At the end of the day, as he was turning in his broom, he saw Private Wilson waiting for him. "How was your first day?" Private Wilson asked. "Hard," Robert admitted, "but good." Private Wilson nodded. "My son saw your apology on TV. He has a question for you." Robert tensed. "What's that?" "He wants to know if you'll come to his class next week. They're learning about America." For a moment, Robert couldn't speak. His throat felt tight. This kindness was harder to face than anger. "I'd be honored," he finally said, and he meant it. As they walked together toward the police car that would take Robert back to his temporary housing, Private Wilson said something that would stay with Robert forever. "The uniform doesn't make the man, Mr. Blackwell. It's what's inside that counts. Today, you showed what's inside you might be worth something after all." 1 week later, Robert stood in front of 25 8-year-old children. They sat on a colorful carpet, looking up at him with curious eyes. Among them was James, Private Wilson's son. He had the same steady gaze as his father. The classroom walls were covered with drawings and maps. A big sign read, "Our World Friends." Robert's hands were sweaty. He had spoken to rooms full of important business people without feeling nervous. But these children made his heart beat fast. "Good morning," Robert said. "My name is Robert Blackwell. I'm from America." A little girl raised her hand. "Are you the man who was mean to James's daddy?" Robert swallowed hard. "Yes," he said. "I was that man." The children looked at him with serious faces. Robert had planned to talk about tall buildings in New York and Disney World in Florida. But looking at these honest faces, he knew he needed to tell the truth. "I did a very bad thing," Robert said. "I was rude and disrespectful to a good man who was doing his job. I thought because I had money, I could treat people however I wanted." The children were quiet, listening carefully. "I was wrong," Robert continued. "No matter how rich or important you think you are, you should always treat others with respect." A boy in the back raised his hand. "My mum says you were a right proper jerk." Some children giggled. The teacher looked embarrassed, but Robert smiled. "Your mum is right," he said. "I was a jerk, but I'm trying to be better now." For the next hour, Robert talked with the children. They asked about America, but they also asked about his life, why he was angry, if he had children of his own, if he was sorry. Robert answered each question honestly. When he told them about his son who wouldn't talk to him, a little girl with pigtails said, "You should say sorry to him too." By the end of the visit, the children had drawn pictures for Robert. Pictures of him with smiles, not frowns. Pictures of him and Private Wilson shaking hands. James gave him a drawing of a man in a business suit standing next to a royal guard. Above them was a big rainbow. "It means forgiveness," James explained. Robert carefully put the drawing in his pocket. "Thank you," he said. His voice was rough with emotion. As he was leaving the school, Robert checked his phone. He had received an email from his son. It was short. "Dad, I saw you on the news. What's going on with you?" Robert stood on the school steps. staring at the message. It was the first time his son had reached out in 2 years. With shaking fingers, he typed a reply. I made a big mistake, but it's helping me see what really matters. I miss you. Can we talk? He hit send before he could change his mind. That evening, Robert met Private Wilson at a small cafe. They sat by the window, watching people walk by. Thank you for letting me speak to your son's class, Robert said. Private Wilson nodded. James said you did well. He said you were honest. I tried to be, Robert said. Your son is a good kid. You must be proud. I am, Private Wilson said. Being his father is the most important job I'll ever have. More important than guarding the palace. Robert thought about his own son, about all the birthdays and games he had missed because of work, about the walls he had built with his money and pride. I heard from my son today, Robert said. He wants to talk. Private Wilson smiled. That's good news. Yes, Robert agreed. It is. As they drank their tea, an idea began to form in Robert's mind. A way to make things right, not just with Private Wilson, but with the Royal Guards as a whole. A way to use his money for good, for once. There's something else I want to do, Robert said. Something bigger than just community service. Private Wilson looked interested. What's that? Robert leaned forward. I want to create a scholarship fund. For the children of Royal Guards who want to go to university. Private Wilson looked surprised. A scholarship fund? Yes, Robert said. A real one. With enough money to help many children, not just one or two. Private Wilson put down his teacup. That's very generous, but why? Because money is the only thing I've ever been good at, Robert admitted. I've made millions, but I've never used it for anything important. This could be important. The next morning, Robert called his lawyers and his bank. He put $5 million into a new account. He named it the Wilson Scholarship Fund for Children of Service. It would give money each year to children whose parents served in the Royal Guards, the police, or other public service jobs. When the news came out, people were shocked. The man who had been called the ugly American was now being called the generous American in newspapers. But Robert didn't care about the papers. He cared about the email he received from his son. Dad, can I call you tonight? That evening, Robert sat in his hotel room, staring at his phone. When it rang, his heart jumped. Hello, he answered. Dad? His son's voice sounded older than Robert remembered. Is it really you in those videos? The man sweeping streets and talking to kids. It's me, Robert said. I'm different now. There was a pause. What happened to you over there? Robert thought about how to explain it. How do you tell someone that your whole life changed because you spat on a stranger? I met someone who showed me what real dignity looks like, Robert finally said. And I realized I didn't have any. They talked for an hour. Robert's son told him about his job, his apartment, his girlfriend. Robert listened more than he talked. He had missed so much of his son's life. I'd like to see you when you get back, his son said at the end of the call. I'd like that too, Robert said. His eyes were wet with tears. The next day was Robert's last day of community service. As he cleaned a park near Buckingham Palace, people stopped to talk to him. Some had seen him on TV. Others had read about his scholarship fund. They were curious about the rich man who now picked up trash. An old man sat on a bench watching him work. You're not what I expected, the old man said. What did you expect? Robert asked. Someone proud. Someone who wouldn't really get his hands dirty. Robert smiled as he picked up an empty soda can. That was the old me. The old man nodded. My son was a Royal Guard. Served for 15 years. Died in service. Robert stopped working. I'm sorry to hear that. He would have liked what you're doing. The old man said. The scholarship thing. He left behind 2 kids. They could use help like that. Robert sat down next to the man. Tell me about them. As the old man talked about his grandchildren, Robert listened. Really listened. He took out a small notebook and wrote down their names, ages, what they liked to study. He promised to have his lawyers contact the family. When the day ended, Robert looked around the clean park. It was a small thing, making one park clean. But it felt good. Different from building a hotel or buying a company. This was something real people would enjoy today. As he was turning in his cleaning tools, he saw Private Wilson waiting for him. But this time, Wilson wasn't alone. Behind him stood 5 other royal guards, all in their regular green uniforms. "What's going on?" Robert asked, suddenly nervous. Private Wilson stepped forward. "These are my colleagues. They wanted to meet you." The tallest guard, an older man with gray hair at his temples, held out his hand to Robert. "On behalf of the Royal Guard, we want to thank you for the scholarship fund. It will help many families." Robert shook the man's hand, feeling humble. "It's the least I could do." "No," the older guard said. "The least you could do was say sorry. This is much more. This is making amends." That night, Robert had dinner with Private Wilson and his family. They lived in a small but neat house in a quiet part of London. James, the little boy from the classroom, ran to the door when Robert knocked. "Mr. America is here," James called to his parents. Private Wilson's wife, Sarah, was a kind woman with a warm smile. She shook Robert's hand without any sign that she hated him for what he had done to her husband. "Thank you for having me," Robert said, feeling shy. He handed Sarah a box of fancy chocolates and gave James a small gift, a toy Royal Guard soldier. "Cool," James said, looking at the toy. "It looks just like Dad." The dinner was simple: roast chicken, potatoes, and vegetables. But to Robert, it tasted better than any 5-star restaurant meal he had ever eaten. There was love in this home, real love. As they ate, they talked about normal things: James's school, Sarah's job as a nurse, the weather in London compared to New York. No one mentioned the spitting incident. After dinner, while Sarah was giving James a bath, Private Wilson showed Robert some family photos. There were pictures of Wilson as a young boy, standing proudly next to his father in a Royal Guard uniform. There were wedding photos, baby pictures of James. "You have a good life," Robert said. "Not a rich one," Private Wilson replied. "But yes, a good one." Robert looked down at his expensive watch. "I'm starting to see those aren't the same thing." Before Robert left, James ran out in his pajamas to say goodnight. He gave Robert a big hug, his small arms barely reaching around Robert's waist. "Are you still the mean man who spat on my daddy?" James asked innocently. The room went quiet. Sarah looked embarrassed, but Robert knelt down to look James in the eye. "I was that mean man," Robert said, "but I'm trying very hard not to be mean anymore. Do you think I'm doing a good job?" James thought about it seriously, then nodded. "You're nice now. Daddy says everyone deserves a second chance." "Your daddy is a wise man," Robert said, his voice rough with emotion. The next day was Robert's last in London. His court case was settled with a fine and his community service completed. He was free to go home. Before heading to the airport, he had one last stop to make. He went back to Buckingham Palace. The tourists were there as always, taking photos of the royal guards in their tall fur hats and red coats. Robert stood behind the barrier, respecting the rules this time. Private Wilson was on duty, standing straight and still. His face showed no sign that he recognized Robert. For a few minutes, Robert just watched. He saw tourists laughing, some trying to make the guards react. He saw a man who reminded him of his old self, acting entitled and rude. Without thinking, Robert walked over to the man. "You might want to show some respect," he said quietly. "These aren't just men in funny costumes. They're soldiers doing an important job." The man looked surprised, then a bit ashamed. He stepped back from the barrier. As Robert turned to leave, he caught Private Wilson's eye. The guard couldn't smile or nod while on duty, but there was a look of recognition, of respect between them. Robert's phone buzzed. It was a text from his son. "Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow, Dad." As Robert walked away from the palace, he felt lighter than he had in years. The rich tourist who had come to London thinking he owned the world was gone. In his place was a man who had learned the most valuable lesson of his life from the person he had treated with the least respect. His lawyer was waiting in a car to take him to the airport. "Ready to go home, Mr. Blackwell?" the lawyer asked. "Yes," Robert said. "But it's not the end. It's just the beginning."